Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining us to help choose home when care is needed, a podcast all about the benefits, value, and safety of receiving care and services in the one place that feels most comfortable, wherever it is that the person needing care calls home. I'm your host, Marilee Orsini, and I've been involved in healthcare at home since 1981. Before we meet today's guest, a brief thank you to our sponsors and partners, the National Association for Home Care and Hospice, Access, and Core Cubed. Today's episode is number 20 of Season 3 and ends this season. Our guest today is Beth Cavenaugh, a certified hospice and palliative care nurse who has just published a book, Light at the End, which actually is one of the best hospice-centered books I have read. Her ideas that more people should walk towards this powerful life event rather than run away from it is made easier after reading her book. Please help me want you and welcome Beth Cavenaugh to help choose home. Well, Beth, first let me say it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today because I think you have a whole lot to offer for our consumer audience. So why don't you start the interview by telling me a little bit about yourself and how you got to write the book and where you are right now in that process.
Okay. Thanks, Marilee. I'm really excited to be on your show. It's my very first podcast ever. So,
congratulations.
So how I got to write the book. So I've been a hospice nurse for about 15 years, and I've been a nurse for about almost 25 years. I've worked in the home setting, and I've worked in inpatient units, and I've worked in the hospital as a hospice nurse. And, hospice nurses spend so much of our time educating the patient about what's about to happen, educating the family about, symptom management, about end-of-life process, about how people are going to die, about what to look for when people are dying, how to manage anxiety, how to, spiritually process the end of life. And we answer the same questions again and again and again. And so, even though each death and each family is very different, there's a lot of the same information that we provide. And so and when you're in a state of crisis, like when somebody's dying in your house, the nurses will talk at you, but a lot of times you don't really understand or you don't really hear everything. I mean, I think it's maybe 10% is what people actually retain when someone's talking to you. So I really wanted to provide some type of resource and reference book for patients and families that they could refer to, at 3 a.m. when they wake up and they go, oh my gosh, mom's dying. How am I going to choose a hospice? Or if a patient's been, the doctor said, we think you're ready for hospice. And the patient's probably not quite emotionally ready for hospice. And I just wanted to provide a guide for them to kind of look at when they're ready. And they can just kind of consider, what is this actually going to look like? Is this what I want? Do I want hospice right now? So I just really wanted to provide that resource. And it was a long, beautiful process of writing the book. I'm not a writer. I guess now I am. But, I'm a nurse. And so it's very conversational about how I describe things to patients and families.
Well, I mentioned to you in our brief chat before we started recording that it is one of the best books I have read on hospice. And the reason I felt that is it does walk you through the information that you need to know. But the other thing I really liked was your just one-page sort of notes to self that are things you would want to do before the end of your life. And how did you come up with those? I thought those were very creative and very helpful for someone who is thinking about that that this is the end of their life.
We called them prompts just because they're simple statements. I think one of them is allow yourself to laugh. And simple statements like that are placed really we were very thoughtful about where they were placed in the book because, you know, when you even contemplate end of life, if it's your end of life or your mom's end of life, it is a huge thing to grasp and get on board with. And so we really wanted to have some pauses in the book where people could just reflect and sit and, you know, stop taking in information.
Well, you mentioned that the powerful event, which is the end of our lives, should be something that we actually are embracing and celebrating, if you will, in a way that no other event calls for. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think that I was with my mom when she died. She died in 1998 from lung cancer. And I had done about a year of hospice work prior to that. And I'd been a nurse for about 2 or 3 years. And I went down to California and I took care of her for the last 3 months of life with my dad and my other siblings. And, you know, it was definitely one of the hardest things I have ever done in my life to meet your mom when she's facing the end of her life and to have some kind of grace and humor and comfort with it. But it was probably the most powerful event that I've ever experienced in my life. Just those 3 months prior to her death, you know, it's something I'll never regret. And then I actually was able to be with her at the end of her life when she took her last breath. And for me, just that entire event, the last 24 to 48 hours was very powerful. And my sister and I were with her when she breathed her last breath. And, you know, even though I wept like a baby, I also felt like this very sacred connection to my mom. And then just to, you know, the bigger mystery of life. So it really is a profound event. And I think if we can honor it as such and, you know, offer patients and families the information they can have so they're not totally overwhelmed when they're taking care of somebody who's dying or when they're dying, then it can be a more peaceful event in general.
I think that's a message I would love our consumer audience to really be able to understand. Just the word hospice sometimes makes people stop dead in their tracks when you say, have you considered calling hospice? As if there is not end of life for all of us. I think that's the thing that always amazes me. So how do you see your book being used for the public to better educate about this powerful event, as you call it? I love that.
Well, it really does walk people through the process of dying. And I think to be able to anticipate what's to come, then you can really think about how you want the end of your life to look and who you want around you and where you want to be. You know, I talk a lot about how their energy and mobility decline over time. When I was taking care of my mom, I would get her out of the bed and stand her up and place her on the commode. And some days it was easier than others. And there was this one day I remember where I was really struggling, and she was tiny. She was probably like 85 pounds at the time. And I was really struggling to get her on the commode. And when I finally did, I basically carried her to the commode. And I thought, well, God, that wasn't pretty. But I think had I known that at some point patients become bedbound and they're just going to be too weak to get out of bed, I would have been much more graceful about it. And I would have just offered mom, Mom, why don't we just stay in bed today? Let's figure out another plan. Maybe I would have called the hospice team for a little more guidance. So I really walk through this process of how people do lose their energy and their mobility and what it looks like. I talk about eating and drinking and how that is part of the decline. It's part of the natural and normal decline at the end of life. And, my dad was trying to feed my mom steak and eggs until the day before she died. And, that's what families do, right? We feed our loved ones. And my dad, he was very committed to saving my mom and he would never acquiesce to the fact that she might die. So I think if people just kind of have this information, it just can be really helpful in terms of guiding them either at the end of their own life or at the end of their mother's life, just knowing, oh, mom's not going to want to eat eggs anymore. Like, let's go get some yogurt. So you can really just kind of plan ahead for it. Did I answer your question, Marilee?
You did, and you answered it very well. As a society, as you know, we really don't talk about death or dying. And it is something that in the medical profession, we try to avoid at all costs. And so a lot of my podcasts this year have been around the fact that hospice is about living until you're not living anymore. And I guess that's the message that I am struggling with. How do I better present that? And your book seemed to me to be a great way to present that, because it explains everything. It gives you tips. And it's more like, as you said, I could picture picking it up at 3 a.m. to read something that I really felt I needed to read. So,
right.
So what are you currently doing? Are you still a hospice palliative care nurse, and are you still working actively?
Yes, I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse, and I work at an inpatient unit. So we have patients who are hospice patients there. Some of them require acute nursing care, so they're called general inpatient status for hospice. And some are just terminally ill, and they will either stay there until they die or stabilize, and maybe they'll go back home. So I work there, and I have got my fingers in a lot of other fun cookie jars. Like I'm doing some other writing projects, and I blog every week about end-of-life care. That's something, I just feel so strongly, Marilee, about getting information out there into the universe that's accessible, easy to understand, not scary. And I feel like I can't help myself, and I just keep writing. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to do this once a week. I'll put a blog out about end-of-life care. And, I just really want people to understand what it looks like.
Well, I wish there was a way for people to know, and it seems like in your book there was some information about that, when to know that it is time to consider not having curative treatment or invasive treatment or lots of treatment, but to just step back and say, perhaps I just want to live.
Right. And not go to medical appointments every day and feel, crummy every day from the chemo or whatever. Well, I think I'm a big fan of patient autonomy. I'm a big fan of patients making their own decisions, even though it may not seem like the right decision so maybe I'm getting chemo, and, maybe I'm not ready to give up chemo, but my daughter who's taking care of me is like, come on, Mom, like, just stop. Enough is enough. I just think everybody has their own path and their own timeline to decide when is the right time for hospice, because even though the physician says now's the time for hospice, it doesn't mean you're ready for hospice. And I think that I've seen enough patients decline hospice. And as a hospice nurse, obviously, I'm a big fan of it. But I also know people come to this very big decision on their own timeline. With that being said, I've definitely seen many patients decline it. And it's really, their life could have actually been so much better for months. Maybe their pain could have been managed better. Maybe their shortness of breath. Maybe their family, they would have access to 24/7 nurses on the phone so they can follow up anytime there's some kind of issue with the parents' care. So when hospice patients are presented with the H word, the hospice word, I feel like when a physician brings that up to a patient and a family member, a lot of times the patients say, nope, I'm not ready. And I get that. I totally get that. However, I feel like doctors do not throw out the word hospice unless there is a significant decline, and unless there really are no more other treatment options, because you can't sign up for hospice unless you meet this very strict eligibility criteria. So they don't just throw it out negligently. So I think if a physician has recommended hospice, I think that it would be really beneficial if you could at least meet with a hospice team, they can come into the home and provide what's called an informational visit and just kind of guide you through how it will look in your home and make it not seem so scary, because I think it's the unknown, right? That's so scary for people. So I feel like when somebody brings up the word hospice, at least, say, okay, you know what? I'm not ready right now, but let's get some information about hospice. I appreciate the sentiment, doctor. No, thank you. But yes, I'll at least meet with them, because then it also, you meet one of the hospice nurses and, they're not so bad. They're actually like normal human beings. And they talk about a lot of the issues that maybe you've been wondering in the back of your head or your daughter's been wondering about. And I think that hospice is a huge relief for the family, because we do provide at least 24/7 phone service. We're not in the home 24/7 at all. It's not a caregiving service, but we are available for the family to talk through concerns with.
Well, that was another thing that I really enjoyed about the book, was a very clear delineation of what kind of help you're going to need. Because as you said, hospice is not there 24/7, but if you choose to die at home, you're there 24/7.
Yeah.
And the needs do become more intense the closer to death one gets. So
Right.
I thought, do you want to just talk a little bit about some of that ancillary support that someone who chooses to die at home might need?
Yeah. I always feel like people need a team when they are at home dying. I think it is saying yes to hospice. You'll have a hospice professional in your home, maybe 6 hours a week, and so the rest of the 162 hours are up to you and the family or friends to carry out. So, you have to think about meals, you have to think about groceries, pharmacy trips, laundry, cleaning sheets, towels, food, like changing foods as their eating habits change. So, from the steak and eggs to, oh gosh, maybe just some scrambled eggs and avocado, or, now it's applesauce and yogurt. So I think that I've taken care of patients in their home as they're living independently. And, you can really only do that well for so long. You really do need at least one person there to help with food and medication trips and the physical care. And then there's a time where you can't actually stand up anymore and you're bedbound. And so you need someone to change your briefs in bed, and you need somebody to provide you food while you're in bed and to change your linens while you're in bed. So it's a surprising amount of physical labor. And, a lot of times hospice patients are older, they're in their 80s, and their partner is taking care of them. And I'm a 51-year-old human, and I feel like I'm pretty strong, but I can't move a patient alone in bed gracefully. So when I think about, I know there's plenty of 80-year-old strong, she women out there, but I think that there's just a point to how much you can physically do. And then, don't forget, there's this huge grief, emotional processing that's going on for everybody. So I just think the more support you can have, the better. So call in the troops, call in family, have real clear conversations about how much one can handle, and have everybody be kind of on call and ready.
Very wise words, I think. I've got two more questions for you. One is going to be, I want you to give me resources, the name of the book where people can buy it, and also your blog. And the second one is, did I not ask you something you thought I was going to ask that you would like to impart to our listeners today?
My book, you can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on my website, which will direct you to Amazon. And my website is bethcavenaugh.com. And it basically shares information about my book, and then it has my blog on it. That's it. And, I guess one of the things that I want people to know is in my book, I talk about how to anticipate when somebody is getting close to dying. And most people do really want to be there for the death. And I think it really is one of the most powerful and sacred events that you can show up for. So even though you might be afraid or feel like you can't do it, I encourage you to walk towards that event and just take a step closer, because it really can connect you on a deep level to your loved one. And when the death happens, I think it's really important to know when somebody's on hospice, we say call the nurse when somebody dies and when the patient dies in your home. But take some time, after the patient dies, take some time, take some moments, call in family if you want them to be there. You can call the hospice at any time and one of them will come out and visit you if you want. But just pause for this holy event and then try to come up with some type of ritual. I think this really gets lost a lot of times. What we do at our hospice home is we bathe the patient at the end of life after they've died. We remove the oxygen. We place a quilt on top of them. Sometimes you can place flowers nearby. You can light a candle if you want to. And just, if you can, if it feels comfortable to you, offer some type of holy ritual, because it doesn't have to be a holy ritual, but a ritual. Because I think when, the hospice nurse will come and visit you, and then the funeral home comes. And I think that after the death, things just kind of happen in a blur, and people don't even really remember, what in the heck happened. And then all of a sudden your loved one is gone and they're out of the house. And, 4 hours later, you're kind of going, what just happened to my life? I've been taking care of my mom this whole time and now she's gone. So I think to offer a reverent pause and come up with something that might feel meaningful to you. Maybe it's music, that you can kind of draw on later in life as you're kind of processing this moment. That can really kind of ground you and help you through your grief process.
Well, that was certainly a wonderful way to end, since that's the end. That is the end. I just want to encourage my listeners to go out and buy your book. And let's tell me again the name of your book.
Oh, yeah.
Light at the End. Is that right?
Yes. It's called Some Light at the End.
Some Light at the End. And it definitely does give you some light at the end. So I do wholeheartedly recommend it. So Beth, thank you so much for your time today. And I wish you best of luck, because you're a very talented writer and you have a lot of things to impart. So thank you for joining us today on Help Choose Home.
Thank you, Marilee. Thank you so much for asking me and inviting me. This was really nice. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening today. And a special thanks to our sponsors and partners, National Association for Home Care and Hospice, Access, and Core Cubed. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to our podcast and take the time to leave a review on Apple Podcast. We are now also on Spotify and most other places where you find podcasts. Like and follow us on social media, and join us, won't you, to spread the word and help choose home when care is needed.